Righto, moving on. Come, data from Tech Mahindra, large system integrator, indeed, well versed in these enterprise solutions that Danny has referred to. Could you share your screen and tell us a little bit about what you've been up to in the AI space?
Yeah, so Richard, thank you. What happens in the whole system is that although we have seen that there are a lot of use cases which all of us are discussing, right? So these kind of use cases are actually driving the whole scenario, right? May it be your digital operation, production, safety, wherever across industry segment, there are video analytics, correct? And we see that this kind of solutions, analytical solutions, day in and day out, it is increasing. With the new technological innovations, we are getting more and more of the use cases which use the camera-based solutions. So now as we are moving towards more and more of the camera-based solutions, so what it is that that would be requiring an intelligent network, and if I may say, that's the 5G. So many of the continents still do not have 5G, and India as such, we still do not have, but it is 4G LTE to predominantly 5G, because 5G is actually a transition, right? It's a transformational journey. It doesn't end or stop. So it has just started. So what it is that would require this kind of intelligent network, where we talk about loads of bandwidth, the 20 Gbps bandwidths, which 3 Gbps is playing 1 millisecond latency and kind of likes, right? So there is a huge bandwidth requirement as we move towards more of the quality video, right? HD quality, FHD quality. Now we are talking about 8K or the 4K videos. This kind of video streaming would definitely require a very high bandwidth, which is probably not being the forte of 4G LTE or the Wi-Fi's of the world. And more so, if we are talking only about one or two devices, it will going to cater. But where we are telling that the whole enterprise situation needs to be, or the whole smart city, or as Hafsa was mentioning, the naked road constructions of the world. So that kind of humongous amount of the data which is getting generated through all the devices put together would definitely require a intelligent network, and that intelligent network is 5G. The performance perspective, the quality aspect. Now there is another aspect which is a driver for using intelligent network, and that's the requirement coming from every data needs to be inferenced on real time. I need to see what is happening just now at this point in time. That's what the requirement which is coming out from across industry segments. They would like to see how the digital safety, how the worker who is going to there in the field is operating the valve. They would like to see that if there is a lone worker, or if there is a fall happening, or if there is a drone capturing the surveillance aspect, all those data which is getting generated needs to be inferenced at real time. And that's where the beauty of MEC, the multi-access edge compute, comes into picture, which is very close to our on-prem setup. That's where the more importance of MEC comes into picture. So we may say that how it is getting benefited, how MEC is getting benefited. We need to see how this whole latency picture comes into picture, how the privacy and the cost aspect needs to be taken care of. As we were discussing sometimes back, that the whole data, if it needs to be processed over cloud, there is not only the backhaul requirement, which increases tremendously, but there is a cost also associated with it. That backhaul can be anything. It can be satellite or over microwave or over fiber. So that backhaul requirement increases drastically. And if we are in a condition where we can process this kind of data over on-prem, over MEC, and maybe 60 to 70% of the data is getting processed onto the on-prem, and rest data is getting transferred to cloud. So that kind of architecture where there is a breakout happening in MEC and then the rest is being transferred over cloud for your monitoring aspect or for your historization aspect, those can be thought of where the cost will go down, because implementing 5G is very capex intensive, right? We need to see that how we get the ROI on the longer run. And that's how these kind of architecture where there is 60 to 70% of the data which is residing on site, where the security aspect or the privacy aspect is also being taken care of, and we need not worry so much that my data is moving out of my premises. And then the processing also happens on the near real time. Okay, so this kind of scenarios are definitely, we need to shift the intelligence which we are seeing, that needs to be shifted to the edge. Okay, and that's where this kind of three-tier architecture is being worked on, and we from TechM, we heavily propound on this kind of architecture where there is an enterprise edge and the infrastructure services along with all the breakouts and the content caching happening on the MEC node, and rest all our ERPs and the PLMs of the world, the enterprise analytics is being taken care of over the cloud. And this way, through SD-WAN, the software-defined WAN network, we can connect the multi-sites, because enterprise is having a foothold across globe, right? So this kind of architecture would definitely going to be in a longer run, which will going to help the whole of the organization. And that's where the beauty of MEC and 5G, the intelligent network and video analytics, given all the use cases which are into the foray, would bring the total ROI and the benefit which the end consumers are looking forward to. And that's what the bottom line is, Richard.
Thank you kindly, Kamkam. Indeed, you may thank you. Stop sharing now. Yeah, looking at this is I think about data proximity, and I think Danny, you got some thoughts on this.
I think Richard, all of the use cases that have been discussed today, Neil mentioned quite a few in terms of the industries that we're moving into. The reality is, it is now about where do we process the compute. So the proximity is key, and it can happen at the edge. Of course, it can happen on the device, but there's a great opportunity now with MEC to really lower the cost of a device. So a great example, we all are familiar with the cost of an Oculus Rift headset. You know, our kids probably want one for Christmas. It's $500. You know, the reason for that, all of the compute is happening on the device. The 5G and the MEC gives us the opportunity to take that away from the device and move that the network or to, you know, to the premises if it's a factory of the future, as Neil described. You know, so it's the compute and where do we process the compute, but by taking it from the device and to the edge of the network or to the location itself. Actually, what we do now is we enable mass adoption of these applications, because we can lower the overall cost of adoption. You know, and especially when we consider about some things like in healthcare, you know, how can we leverage for telemedicine or for care in the community, care homes, how can we use video analytics devices or mixed reality, virtual reality devices to provide healthcare, leveraging a public 5G network, and therefore it doesn't require big infrastructure payments from the business to take advantage of that and lower the cost of adoption of these technologies. All of that is only possible because the proximity of the data. Where is the data and where is that being performed? And of course, Paul also talked about it. Let's do it in the car. We don't need to do it, maybe at the edge of the network. It could be mobile, and in which case then and you want that to happen, right? In autonomous vehicles, we don't want the information to be processed. Is that a human crossing the road? Is that a cyclist in front of me? We don't want to do a round trip to AWS in the cloud or to Alibaba, Alibaba in China. We want to be making that decision in real time. So how do we do that? We do it at the edge. So proximity is king when we come to video analytics and getting a real return on the investment, but it's also king in terms of reducing the cost of adoption. Over time, our ability to move that data and process it closer to the edge and off of the device, and that's quite important. It's going not just from the cloud, but to the edge, but also from the device to the edge. That creates this great adoption of application use cases that can really see us explode in terms of where we can bring transformation.
Thanks. Yeah, we had a question in from Dean, a good one. I mean, many of the device cameras and whatever, more and more of those are looking to put more and more compute onto the device to sort of pre-process before they send the data out. So there is that trend. So Danny, others, please comment. Do you see that as something that's antagonistic? Is this something they've resorted to because we haven't had the capabilities that Mech produces? Or are they both going to blossom and it's a horses for courses sort of thing?
Yeah, my view at this stage, Richard, would be that it's complementary. It's about processing the edge compute. So these can start to deliver the transformative outcomes. We haven't fully, and just in the same way, there's lots of different ways we can deliver 5G networks. So private networks, hybrid networks, dedicated networks, in-building 5G schemes. So there's lots of different ways you can skin a cat with the 5G architecture. The same is true of the edge compute. So it's on the device, it's at the edge of the network, it's on the premise, and it comes in different form factors. The application and the outcome, so what are we trying to achieve and how are we trying to achieve it, determines the best route to that. So from my perspective, all of these are complementary in terms of delivering true automation and true transformation. The example that Neil gave around, Rolls-Royce building the engines and having video analytics right across the factory plant, that makes a lot of sense for that to happen at the plant and not on the cameras. Those cameras don't need to be expensive cameras with edge compute running on them when we can run that edge compute in the corner of the factory. That's, so lots of the cameras talking to the compute at the edge of the factory. However, if we have a use case, maybe Paul's in a city sphere where actually a lot of the compute happens dispersed across the city, then it makes a lot of sense to put the compute in the camera, or maybe in a distributed mech environment where we can deploy distributed mech. So AWS, they've got their capability wavelength. We're bringing that to the UK. that's sorry, that's the distributed mech approach. So I think it's horses for courses is the answer, and depending on the outcome and depending on the way in which we wish to deploy the technology, will it depend how we skin the cat.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that, Danny. I think we end up with edge computing at every layer, because if we take the kind of transport and autonomous vehicles kind of example, in that we know that we want to be able to make decisions at a car level, but we know that we want to be able to make decisions at a road level. So it becomes, how does a car communicate to the road? And the road needs the ability to make those decisions. So you have edge on the road. We know that those roads need to communicate to one another. So actually, how do you have edge computing within regions or nationally to say, well, if we reconfigure the road environment, where do we never get rid of traffic, we just shift it to somewhere else. So what will the impact of that be? And I think you can kind of see that almost edge computing has to happen at each layer where you want a decision to happen. So you can kind of see where you would have edge computing in a car, edge computing on a road or on a street, and then edge computing at a network level. So I think they are really complementary, because in reality, we can have the most intelligent roads in the world, but if the cars can't keep up with that and make decisions based on that information, you never really get the true benefit. So I think it is that kind of horses for courses, and actually layering some of these solutions and saying, right, well, we'll do some compute at this level because that's the right place for that. But actually there's some compute that's the next level up. And then there's some that we just send off for more advanced analytics in the cloud as well. And kind of all of those things blend together to give you the perfect solution.
Good example, Paul.
Oh, thank you kindly. Righto, break things up a bit. We're going to move on to sort of regulatory issues and what have you. But first, Aparna, a poll. Okay, indeed. Please let us know which of these amongst the audience do you understand most, are you most comfortable with? Okay, gone sort of thing. I think we'll have this up for about 30 seconds or thereabouts. And so much for democracy. Hosts and panelists don't get a vote on that one. Thanks, indeed. The committee will take that one. Oh, there we go. Okay, right. Thanks. That's helpful. So we're all 5G experts. We know a little bit about MEC and the video analytics bit. Never fear, we've got some of that coming up. But first, Hafsa. Okay, so we're taking all these high definition pictures of people's faces and things like this. There must be regulatory aspects to running these systems. Could you give us an indication of some of the implications there?
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest sort of aspect that comes to mind when talking about 5G and also video analytics is sort of the citizens' hesitancy due to privacy and the regulations that exist around there. So I think there's a part about understanding that what actually edge computing allows us to do is to work within the realms of existing regulation where it impacts the privacy of individuals. So it's possible for a camera to be able to process all of the information on edge and only transfer the data that pertains to, you know, an incident or whatever the use case is, or irregular behavior, so that actually the privacy of the masses is not compromised. We're seeing solutions come up which actually, you know, anonymize the data before it leaves that device, so before it gets onto the cloud. So it's actually bypassing a lot of the typical regulatory but also consumer hesitations that we would see. The other area about regulations worth talking about, so from a more local council and cities perspective as well, is working with them. I mean, it's very similar to the poll that we just conducted in the sense that there is different levels of maturity depending on where you go and who you talk to. So you have some cities, not just talking about the UK, but generally globally, developed nations, we have cities who really understand 5G, they understand use cases, and, you know, like Paul mentioned, like going out there, trialing things, seeing how it's going to benefit them and the citizens. At the same time, we've got some councils and cities who are not actually sure what 5G does for them. What they get is a lot of people knocking on their doors, asking for planning permissions for things that they don't fully understand. So it's all well and good that there's regulations and a lot of work is being done by the UK government on making sure that we have appropriate regulations for innovation, but there is inconsistency in how it's applied and understood at the local level. As Denny's been mentioning, this uh, this innovation needs to be led by the use case. It needs to be led by the need. And if the end consumer and business doesn't fully understand that, then this can be quite difficult to actually achieve. So it's one of the barriers that we keep seeing as of coming up. So there's number one, understanding of 5G, understanding of what MEC is, understanding of video analytics and how that can help. Then going on to actually what the regulations are and how they apply to each council. So whether that's planning permission. I mean, and not so long ago, we saw news about councils taking too long to approve planning permissions. That's a constant thing we hear about. And every time it comes to regulation and everything new, there's always a danger of analysis paralysis. where it's something new, you don't fully understand it, so you go into analyzing loads and actually miss the opportunities that some of these innovations present. So I think yeah, actually, I think it all kind of drills back down to that there's a lack of consistent understanding of the technology itself, but also the regulations that are in place to promote it.
Thanks. Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think it's a given that we need more stuff, furniture, kit for 5G, and this means a lot of locations, sites are required by infrastructure providers, operators to do this. And there isn't universal understanding, peace and harmony around that process. I've been quite impressed with the work that's been primarily driven out of West Midlands Combined Authority and the DCMS barrier busters around things like EC code valuations and how to take some of the pain out of that, and also the strategic mapping of location for potentially assets as you digitalize going forward. Paul, you must have plenty of experience of smart cities context of some of these regulatory issues. Can you share some learnings, both positive, negative, maybe?
Yeah. So I think in terms of the deployment of infrastructure, it benefits me very well. That's how I make a living. So we are starting to see councils employing people who are actively there to engage with the market, and kind of my job is to go at the market and get more people to deploy more in North Tyneside and to deploy faster and better. So we are starting to see changes in that, and I think we are starting to see changes in attitudes, and kind of, as with many things, the COVID crisis has helped that in terms of reframing the importance of digital infrastructure. So it's no longer just seen as, oh, well, people are digging up the roads or putting masts up. And I think that's really helped and changed the attitudes. In terms of the regulatory issues, I think, like Hafsa said, there's some things that edge computing can help with. I think the other things that we've done is we've worked really closely with the university and with people like MHCLG, making sure that we do really robust ethical assessments on anything that we do. So kind of we rule out and say we're not going to do as many things as we say we are going to do, because everything's technically possible now. The other thing that we did do really early on was have this ethos of, we're going to work out in the open and we're going to be really transparent about what we do. And part of that, so people can see what we're doing, but part of that is actually all of our benefit really comes from citizen behavior change and people making more informed decisions. So we always said from the start, we want to push as much information out to the citizen as we can. So making sure they know exactly what we do. So all of our CCTV cameras, you can go on a website and you can look at every 5 minutes, it takes a snapshot, and those are open source for anyone to use. So all of the public can actually see all of the things that we are using as well. So there's this real trust and transparency around kind of, how does a city not look like a big brother, when that's inherently the kind of what people think of when they think of cameras. And like I say, our approach has just been to be really open and honest and be really visible and be really encouraging for people to interact with the data themselves, but making sure that that's backed up by, again, if you look on the How Busy Is Toon website, you'll see a really robust privacy statement. So exactly what we're doing with the data, how we're processing it, and how long we will keep it, and ethical assessments around what we will do and what we won't, and what things we are happy to do. So we'll never track people, we just count people. We never kind of look at people's faces and do any analysis on that. We don't really do routes of, like, we'll never track where you've been in a city. We might track the direction that you're walking in, so we can see how many people are going up a street and how many people are going down a street. But we never kind of track individuals around. So I think it's just having those kind of core principles that you then stick to, because there's always but it can do this. We could see who's wearing a mask and we could police mask usage. And those are things that we've just never wanted to do and have no desire to do. So it's about that being brave enough to say, like, the technology can do it, but we don't want to do that. And these are why we don't want to do those things.